Okay, today I'm talking about gesture lines. Oh, spooky. So, what is a gesture line? But a gesture line is pretty much, um, so if you look at if you look at a human, um, it is the line that goes from the back of their head down the body, kind of follows the curve of the body, and goes down to the foot that has the most weight on it. That is basically what a gesture line is. It's the line of, so this kind of top half bit, this whole entire section is the line of, like that bit is the line of the spinal cord. That's the spinal cord that, follows all the way down, allows you to actually, bend your body and stuff. That's the spinal cord. But then the one down here is a center point of weight, where you're putting your weight. It's the foot that goes completely. I swear, I lose my train of thought freaking every other second. So it's the line that goes down the foot, goes to the heel, or wherever you're putting your weight back, basically. You may be wondering, well, how do I know it's a gesture line? Well, let me show you. So the gesture line is, so it goes down here, follows the curve of the spine, and then goes to the foot that has the most weight on it, which is this foot, okay? Basically, the best way to, most of the time, the weight, unless it's a pose that's in motion, in which case it could very well not be this case, but most of the time when it's a stationary pose, nearly, if not all the time, it is the foot that is closest to being right underneath the body, So this is the body, and this foot comes off here, it doesn't even go to the body, it's kind of pointing out away from the body, and then this foot is pointing in, kind of pointing in towards the body, and that is the case. That's going to be the foot that has the most weight on it. And it doesn't sound very easy to figure out, but it's actually quite intuitive, If you know what you're looking for, it's really easy, just imagine yourself in that pose, and then imagine which foot you're putting more weight onto. Yeah. That's pretty simple. Another thing is, the foot that doesn't have the weight on it is usually pointing on, the toes. It's kind of hanging in the air almost. Yeah, that's just something that humans do. Humans do all the time. And having this line that kind of follows the body will give you dynamic poses. As long as this is curving, and a lot of the time it is like an S shape. So if I follow this, it's kind of doing that, which is an ever so slight kind of S shape, It's like an S shape but inverted, So like that's an S shape. It's kind of doing that, but it's just like inverted, Ever so slightly, because that's a more kind of stationary pose. But if you want a more active pose, then you can go like a full-on S shape, This is another thing that helps with gesture. Having so basically, if you rotate the shoulders, you're going to want to rotate the hips in the opposite direction to a fairly equal amount. Okay, not an exactly equal, but a fairly equal amount. Yeah, and this is going to go down here, so then this foot will go here. This foot's going to go straight down as well, and you may notice that if you think about this in 3D space, this foot isn't going to reach the ground. So, we're not going to have it reach the ground. We're going to have it kind of dangle above the ground, Kind of like something like that, And then, we're going to have a hand on the shoulder. The reason why I like to do hands on the shoulders is because it helps to kind of scrunch up into one point, kind of helps to keep that kind of scrunched up look. You know, that's why I like to do that sometimes. You know, that's another thing about the composition of body. When people think composition, they just think backgrounds, but no, composition also applies to the figure, you know, their clothing, their pose, everything. It applies to absolutely everything. Oh, quick silence in my own video. Damn, that's crazy. Yeah, and so then, you know, we're just gonna have this pop off. It sounded like I was gonna give information when I wasn't. Sorry to trick you guys. My bad. Yeah. So that's just something to keep in mind, you know, a little tidbit, you know. Like, this is an extreme pose. Okay, I call this extreme. And this is good for, like, anime or cartoon. If you're doing a more realistic style, it may not fit. But, you know, just, yeah, look up reference and copy the pose. You can also try copying the pose, but then exaggerating. So see, this shoulder's higher than this shoulder, so I'm going to make it really high. And this is kind of flat on the base, so I'm going to do something like that. And this arm's coming out, so we're going to have it really come out. This arm's going forward, so we're going to have it really coming forward. This arm's going out. This leg's going out, so we're going to have it go really out. So it's going inward, so we're going to have it go really inward. Well, that's because that's just pointing straight down, we're actually just going to have it still point straight down. Because, yeah, that's another thing. Try not to exaggerate the foot that has the weight on it too much. Because then if you do, it's going to mess with the balance, and then your gesture line isn't going to, you know, really work as well. You know, it's not going to follow it as well. Also, I don't know why I'm using the stick figure method. I've never used the stick figure method. I've never used it in my life. But I'm using it now. It's really not working. It's not working at all. You know what? This dude has his foot pointed out, but we're going to make it seem, I don't know, just a bit more like, I don't know, a little more flary, you know, a little bit more, I don't know, posing kind of thing, you know, like you're specifically trying to pose. And we're going to have it face inward, you know? Yeah. So we're going to have that, and we're going to have it face inward, and then, you know, we can just have that, blah blah blah, arm and stuff, things like that. Simple stuff, nothing too crazy, okay? And then we just have this going inward, there you go. Okay? Again, nothing crazy, okay? Just some very basic stuff. Alright? So we took this pose and we exaggerated it, and we got a completely different pose. And that's how a lot of people do poses. But, you know what, how do you practice drawing the gesture line? Well, you get a bunch of references of just people like this, you know, they can be in action poses, they can be in any pose you want. And then you just get a red color, and then do whatever, and just try and find the gesture line, you know? Try and find the gesture line, try and see why that works. Well, and you'll notice, you know, stationary poses have less of a curve. You know, stationary poses usually C curves. Oh yeah, sorry, my bad. It's not just S curves. They're not usually just S curves. They're also sometimes C curves. You know, they're never like that, okay? It's only ever going to have a bump and a bump, okay? Because the human body can't do more than that, you know? If I do this, then I do that, then I do that, then that's going to have to be the legs. You know, you can have more than that many bumps, but you can only have 3 or 4, you know? Because then this one might be the foot, and then that's kind of all you can do. So try to understand exactly what we do. Just don't make like a random scribble and expect to go and make a pose out of it, you know? Like, I'm making a pose out of it, but I'm like having to kind of work around it, you know? Yeah. So that's all something. Yeah, so how you practice it is you do that, you know, try and find the gesture curve. And then you just do that a bunch of times, and then you can then apply it. You know, once you're confident enough, you can move on to applying it in your post practice when you're, you know, looking at references, but not drawing over them. You know, then you can try and imagine it. You know, instead of drawing it out, you can try imagining it. You know, and then you can imagine the pose or gesture line in the pose, you know. You can imagine what that looks like. And the gesture line doesn't have to be the whole entire body. It can be just, you know, it can be just the legs, it can be just the body, whatever you feel isn't dynamic enough, you know, or whatever you're scared of not being dynamic enough. Yeah, and then the main thing, really, I'd say the main thing is to figure out what leg has the most weight on it, because then, once you figure it out, you can exaggerate literally everything else. You know, you can exaggerate everything, you know, like if you look here, everything here is exaggerated except this foot. This foot is still completely straight. I didn't move that at all. Because if I knew that if I did, it would look really, really weird. And when you say the foot that has the most weight on it, it doesn't mean this foot doesn't have any weight on it. It just means this foot has less weight on it than this foot. Just a little tip. But yeah. So, you know, then you do that. Yeah, and I mean, you know, that does also affect the entire body, you know. Whichever foot has the most weight on it will likely, you know, if it has a pelvis turn, if the pelvis is turning, which it more than likely is, like 98% of the time it is. So, the way the pelvis is turning, usually, you know, if you look at here, this is probably his pelvis, that's probably something like that. You can see this one, this part, half of the pelvis, is a little bit more, like, is a little bit higher up than this side. And the lower side is the side of his foot that has the most weight on it. So that's another little tip, you know, keep in mind. Yeah, you know, that's just how it cascades down the body, you know. And yeah, this will basically, just doing this one little thing will nearly guarantee you a more dynamic pose. You know, adding perspective to that, on top of all that, although, you know, it does require more knowledge of the human body and perspective, obviously, or adding perspective, it requires you to know perspective. It will also help you to do poses and a lot more, you know, not just poses, it'll help you to do composition, it'll help you to do clothing, you know, folds, help you to do accessories, you know, hair, basically everything on the human body requires perspective, even the human body itself. So it'll help, you know, turn it in 3D space, and, you know, just a myriad of things. It'll help you with a myriad of things in art. Yeah, so that's why I think the three most important things in art when it comes to drawing people is proportion, perspective, and dynamicism. In my opinion, the way it goes, in my opinion, like, you know, if I have a pyramid of, you know, most important things, you know, it'd probably go, I don't know how to spell proportion. That's probably spelled wrong, I don't care. I failed in math. Okay, proportion, and then it would go dynamicism, and then it would go perspective, doesn't fit, but yeah, perspective, so it is proportion, dynamicism, and perspective. That's my kind of, you know, pyramid of how important these things are, you know. Proportion's fundamental. Obviously, you need to draw something, you need to know what it looks like. You know, I view proportion as what it looks like and the measurements. Not just the measurements, I view as what it looks like as well. And then you have dynamicism. That helps you to make good poses. You know, if you have dynamicism, then you can draw good poses. And then perspective is to give those poses more dimensionality. You know, you can be a great artist without dynamicism or perspective. If you focus fully on proportion, you know, and anatomy and stuff, all that stuff, then yeah, you can become a great artist. You know, you'll get something like, what was his name? That dude that does, like, drawing for 10,000 hours or something. He's on YouTube. He has, like, the green monster dude with, like, a ponytail, I think. This is his profile picture. I can't remember. The annoying thing is, it's right on the tip of my tongue. I always get that. It's like a word is right on the tip of my tongue. Like, she has very squeaky. Right on the tip of my tongue, and I just do not know what you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then, you know, you can be great with just dynamicism. You know? Like if you're doing gesture drawings all the time, then you're great. Then that will be really good with dynamicism. But you can't really be a great artist with just perspective. Because then, you know, your measurements are going to be all off if you don't have proportion or dynamicism. Also, I must also say, perspective is linked to proportion. Because you kind of have to know proportion to know perspective. You know? I was going to say you have to know perspective to know proportion, but not really. Yeah, so you have to know proportion to know perspective. Proportion is necessary for perspective, because proportion doesn't just apply to people, it applies, you know, to things like cars, you know? If I do this, and then I draw a person, you know, you can probably tell this car's tiny, because the proportions are off. The proportionate relationship between these two is completely wrong. But then, if I do a person more like that, you know, you can tell, oh, that person's way too small for that car. But then, if I do something like that, just right, that, then I don't know. I think that's around about right. Probably not. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not. You know, maybe something a bit closer, like, you know, that. You know, like that, you know, you can tell, hell yeah, dude, that's a person that looks like he can fit in that car. Yeah. So, just a few things to keep in mind, you know, nothing crazy. It's just a little, you know, tips and tricks of what I believe is very important for good poses, you know. Obviously you can do all this without good poses, but you know, it, yeah, in my opinion, it's kind of important, but yeah.
Hayato.
So that was the video. Yeah, I know, it was pretty cool. Way back. It was... And then send me a picture of your credit card, please. Thank you.